It's now early fall and the soybeans we planted this spring are starting to dry down and about ready to harvest. And like always, I'll include the expenses and revenue of growing 30 acres of soybeans and see if we made a profit or a loss. And these are the steps we took to get to this point. First, last fall after corn harvest, we did a light disc pass to help size up some of the residue and speed up the breakdown. And then we planted right into that the following spring, April 13th, which is pretty early in our region, and this is how it took off growing. Now here's the soybeans that are just coming out. These were planted 2 weeks ago. Yeah, they're just coming out. Certain spots where there's not as much residue, or they weren't as deep, they're poking through. This field will be all soybeans, so a lot of residue they have to push through yet. Now this picture here is 1 month exactly after planting. It for sure had a slow start with colder soil temps as we planted so early. The risk is the seed doesn't have enough energy if we get another hard freeze, or the leaf starts coming up here and we get a really hard freeze and kills it off. But thankfully none of that happened and it continued to grow from here. Now like I said, we got a lot of rain with 8 inches up to this point in early May. We have some drowned out spots for sure, and some spots that aren't going to grow at all. Now the month of May and June in total came to just around 13 inches of rain, but thankfully they were spread out and we didn't get bad floods like other parts of the Midwest. Now in soybeans, weeds can be a big issue, so we put down a pre-emerge pass, and this here is the post-emerge pass in June. And by the end of June, the canopy was starting to close here, and this is mid-July. Things really took off. The canopy is fully closed here, and you can see some side hill seeps areas on the drone. Now every time I walk up those side hills or when we were pulling the sprayer through it, it was really wet when everything else was dry. Now what's happening is water is soaking in through the hilltop and then seeping out the side hill, and that's where you can see the area that's wet and the growth is stunted. We did have a guy come out with a drone and we did 1 application of fungicide as well. Now in total, we got 28 inches from the day of planting to the day of harvest, which is above average. And now it's September, the leaves have dropped, and this is what the soybeans look like before harvest. This is what the bean field looks like now. All the leaves are on the ground. All those green leaves that you saw earlier, those are right here, fell off. And then now you can crack these open real easy. It's not green anymore, it's dry, somewhat dry. There's a bit of weeds in this field too, and then some grass took over right there, some over here, and there's some other spots that there's some decent amount of weed pressure in here. But there are a lot of 4 bean pods like right here. But we got some rain a few days ago, and now these are just probably drying out here. Grant's on his way with the combine. I got the wagons here, and we'll just kind of dive into this field and just make sure the combine, yield monitor, all that stuff is working right. Dump from the combine into the scale. That will weigh it so we can calibrate the yield monitor, do everything right. And that's how much we weighed right there. So we'll see how much we were off. And then now we'll know exactly what we're yielding in the field, certain parts, all that kind of stuff. We got the yield monitor dialed in and moisture is perfect at around 12%. Yields are ranging from 50 to 90 bushels per acre in the bad and the good spots. Now we'll see what we can get done.
Well, Father is a betting man. six-pack of Corona, betting that his son will win again. Go bet another six-pack, bet I make a comeback. I know that this table's gotta lean. Won't you take me fishing, and I wanna try out for the 7th grade football team. You'll probably be nothing but this town's old drunkard and die on a smoke-stained stool. But right now he's got a bargain that he's taking too far on his boys' game of 9-ball pool. My father was a betting man, but I got myself a steady hand. He's sitting in the corner with a six-pack of Corona, betting that his son will win again. My father was a betting man. My father was a betting man, but I got myself a steady hand.
So on the ticket there, the last one was 10.5%. So we started the day off at 12.5, and things just get drier and drier throughout the day. So it's good that we're stopping, and then tomorrow morning should be a little more damp. It's the next morning. Grant's gonna bring in this 500 bushel wagon, and then two of our wagons should be good for the day. Here's one of these. It's kind of hard to tell from the camera, but the beans are very small, and these are one of the spots I was showing you on the drone where all that vegetation wasn't there and the beans were way shorter. So it's interesting. We haven't fully figured it out. We think some of it's side hill seep, and then some of it's just... This is the last day as we're finishing up the field here. It took us a total of 4 separate days to harvest the whole entire 65-acre field. And that's mainly because we have to wait till noon for the dew to burn off, and then we end around 5 p.m. as the soybeans start to dry down pretty quick, and we had some hot, windy days. Every percent of moisture that drops, you're missing out on potential yield, as you get paid on weight, and water is part of that weight. So we always like to end early, as you're kind of losing money the later you go into the day. And like I said, keep in mind my field is the 30 acres, and so we combined Grant's 35 acres together, so it's one field. It might look a little different than last year, as when I was corn we had the field separated by a fence row. And while most of the time Grant ran the combine, I hauled the loads into town.
Okay, me and Spencer did some totaling based off the scale tickets. It yielded above expectations 71.3 bushels an acre so far. Now there's 1 acre of replant stuff that'll probably yield like 40 or 50 bushel that we're going to go back in 2 weeks. So really it probably yield like 70 or 69 or something like that.
Now this is the fun part, always to jump back on the computer and check out the field, what it looked like. This is the yield map that we have in the combine on an iPad. So as we're going throughout the field, this is starting to colorize. Dark green is 70 bushels or greater. The worst yielding spots right here, wet area. This is a wet side hill area. Same here, we can see all our side hill seeps we were talking about. This is literally nothing grew here. So some of this is 0 bushel along the tree line. And this is kind of side hill eroded area. For fun, we can make some drawings real quick. And this is probably a good spot to draw. Our yield monitor should have been dialed in. Just about 1 acre that we highlighted. See, here's what's really important is our moisture. We had 10.7%. The closer to 13, the better. And then in that area we highlighted, we did 80 bushels to the acre. So that's pretty cool. And then we'll grab a bad spot. Let's say right here. I know right here for sure is a wet spot. Like this is good dirt. There's nothing wrong with it. But I just know it sits wet. And so in contrast, that dropped it down to 65 bushels. There's way worse areas than that for sure. But just shows you a difference. So extremely happy with the yields. I was expecting somewhere around 60, and for all the crazy rain we got this spring and flood spots, and then it actually got somewhat dry in August. Not that bad, not complaining at all, but I would say with everything, super happy with the yields. Now money wise, where does that put us for soybean revenue? First, here I pulled up a 4-year price chart of soybean futures with them peaking out in this 4-year window of spring of 22. And ever since they've come down. Currently we're sitting at a 4-year low. Now since I don't have grain bins, everything that we harvest we are going to sell. We can't store any of it for the future. Now thankfully back in May I made a sale here. It was 700 bushels and the price was $11.58 or $8,000 worth. Now from May of this year prices have come down about to $9.60 what I sold at harvest, or a decrease of around 18%. Here's our total acres of soybeans, 30. That brings us to a total of 2,000 bushels, and that's 70 bushels per acre. And we ended up getting an average price of $10.75. That brought our total revenue to $22,182. Now, obviously, this is just revenue. We have to deduct our costs to find out if we made a profit or a loss. And so here's the detailed spreadsheet to show all our costs and revenue. Once again, this is our 30 acres of beans. Our market price was $10.75 and our yield was 70 bushels to the acre. So first, here's our expense list and our cost per acre here. First big one is land. We have a big fat 0 right there for now. We're going to act like we own the land outright. And even if you own it outright, you're always going to pay property taxes. So here's the $29 an acre for that. Here is our crop insurance, $12 an acre. Seed came in at $65. We put some line down here this fall at $11 an acre. I made sure to do that before we put our alfalfa in, because that's very important to balance our pH. Our fertilizer expense, spread that as well in the fall. Our herbicide applications here, fungicide here that comes in, applications included. That fall tillage pass at $10. And again, a lot of this stuff, $25 for the planter. I don't own the equipment, so we're using custom ISU rates here. Spraying, 2 passes on the application, $12 an acre. Borrowed Grant's combine as well, and his tractor and wagons. We had no drying expenses, no storage, and no tiles. So that brings our expense per acre at $350 per acre. And that was just cost of production. So again, if we own the land outright, which we do not, we have money borrowed on it. But if we did, that came our margin out to about $400 an acre. But that is not the case. We have borrowed money to purchase the land. And when you borrow money, you borrow with an interest rate attached to that. Our weighted average interest rate is 4%. And we're currently borrowing around $337,000. That brings our per acre cost of interest at $300 per acre. So now once we include that $300 of interest expense, it brings our profit margin to $98 per acre on our 30 acres of soybeans. And that's a profit of $2,900. So a good thing we yielded good and we locked in some of those higher prices. Now another thing I'm excluding is looking at our cash flow. We actually paid $265 this year per acre in equity down on the loan. And so now we can see our negative cash flow. Again, this is cash flow. This money right here is equity that I'm putting into the land. I'm eventually going to pay off the land once I make enough payments. And so this number isn't a loss, but it's a negative cash flow. So I need to come up with pretty much $5,000 this year in order to make all my payments, cover all my expenses. Again, here's our expense per acre, cost of production, and then with that land expense that we included, that's what it comes to, total cash flow, what I need to come up with per acre at the end of the year. And so I come up with some off-farm income to cover this payment here on our 30 acres of soybeans. And this is if I was trying to live off the land, I would be negative in the hole right here. It's not necessarily a loss, but is a cash flow negative. And so that's how we ended up on our 30 acres of soybeans this year. Pretty cool to see all the numbers come together and see how they compare from year to year. Now it's time to mow the waterways, harvest some of the ponded areas that we couldn't get to earlier, and clean up the equipment. Now it's 10 days after we harvested the field. We're gonna go get a few drowned out spots. It'll be like 50 bushel or 100 bushel of soybeans. So thankfully I only had a few little small drown out spots in the field like this. The beans were way too green and now they're brown and they'll crack open. So Grant's gonna slug through it. Obviously a lot of weeds in here, water hemp and stuff. That spot yield
13.9 bushels per acre, baby.
Oh, that was actually pretty good. This is what Grant's looks like. So all this water couldn't have escaped. It sat here, killed everything off, and then he went and reseeded after, replanted. So this is about an acre, and there's a bit more beans in here. It should yield better, but it looks like the weeds are a little heavier too. Grant made a few adjustments on the combine, so we're gonna throw a bit more beans out the back, but should be able to get a cleaner sample. But there's actually quite a bit more beans in here than mine by far. Trains going by. It's pretty cool down here. There goes a pheasant. We got there's a CRP buffer strip. So it looks like Grant's spooking quite a bit of pheasants hanging out in this little patch. It does look like down here in the wettest spot, there's literally no beans. It totally drowned out for a second time. So the thing about this weed, water hemp, is all these are seeds. So when somebody bumps it, I just hit that. Now you could just see the bare dirt's covered in seeds from the wind. Yeah, there's nothing to combine here. There was a little bit down there, nothing here. After the soybeans, we ended up harvesting Grant's 80-acre cornfield not too far away. We then got everything put away and cleaned up for the winter. Now, most of the actual soybean harvest run the combine is on Grant's channel, and his corn harvest is there as well. Now, all in all, super happy with the yields, can't complain, and we'll be rotating into corn next year on this 30-acre field.